welcome to another episode of Prime Time. I've got Nick beside me, Dad, Richard Kairouz on the bench. What a week we had. It's good to be back in the studio. We were just in Abu Dhabi for UFC 294.
Fight Island.
Fight Island, look, as an experience, great.
Lovely place, very hot but very clean.
Extremely muggy. But those places are designed for events. They got F1 there. That's pretty much the home of the UFC. And I think it's like a fake place. I'm not going to say, it's like, you know, the place where Wally, everyone goes and gets sent on the ship. It's just like, it's just tailored for consumers and you to be there. Everyone was there for the UFC.
Everything's state of the art. It's massive. Like you walk in there, everything's just like got such a grand design.
There's Ferrari World. There's their amusement park.
Yeah, small.
But we didn't really get to experience it like crazy. We were just going from hotel to hotel, then to Etihad Arena, then to different events. But unbelievable experience. We got to meet Islam Makhachev, Khamzat Chimaev, you know, meet Volk and Volk's team. We stayed at the same hotel, got to meet them.
It's hard not to fanboy around some of these fighters because you see them on TV, then you actually see them in real life. You're like, oh, these real people.
Just kind of cross paths with Dana White a little bit before going into the media tent. I was like, fuck, you know, he's actually a real person. You're walking past. It was pretty surreal.
But big reaction from the UFC. Main takeaway is these Dagestanis are just different. There's about 4 or 5 Dagestani fighters on there. And I'll include a Khamzat. Yes, he's Chechen, but it's all the same.
There was Shara Magomedov, who we got to interview just after his UFC debut. These guys are scary people.
They've taken over the UFC.
Yeah.
They're the best fighters in the world. All they care about is their religion, their family, and their craft, which is fighting.
Well, I mean, Islam's been on record and says, all I do is eat, sleep, and train. And it's just a working formula for them. They've taken over the UFC. And people are going, oh, they're boring. You know, I'm sick of just seeing Dagestani wrestlers just taking over the sport. Someone beat them. Someone be better than them.
Well, they're not boring because they do numbers on social.
And yeah,
well.
they've got massive followings. They're humble in defeat and obviously winning, and which is what Islam did over the weekend. People were, you know, and I even just rubbing shoulders with Volk team, I thought they were going to cause this upset. They were talking at 12 days' notice. It was meant to be. And ultimately, these guys are the ultimate professionals, these Dagestanis. They prepared for it, and he was the better man on the day. Caught him with a good head kick. It was unbelievable to be there. Hopefully,
I loved seeing after though both Volk and Islam taking a photo together. I think before their flights.
Yeah,
they took nothing but respect for each
Caleb
other.
Posted it on Instagram too.
It was like, mate, these guys are the ultimate fighters. They showed ultimate respect to each other, and hopefully they get a match together down the line with Volk getting more than 12 days notice.
I don't know. I think that's Volk cashed in his chips and. That was probably the last matchup
If he goes on another run in the flyweight division and maybe beats a better lightweight fighter, obviously not fighting Islam, but if he beats like a Charles Oliveira,
featherweight, you're saying, yeah.
No, I'm saying if he beats a lightweight fighter, he might get another opportunity at that title, whether it be Islam if Islam hasn't gone up yet.
Well, I guess we'll see. But that was our UFC experience. As always, we go to the fan question of the week. Make sure you leave in your comments in the YouTube comments, Instagram comments, wherever it be. What's the fan question for the week?
Who had the better three-peat? Hawthorn or the Panthers?
That's a tough question.
I think it's not a tough question. I think it's pretty easy. I think the Penrith Panthers had a more impressive three-peat just because it's more rare to have a three-peat in the NRL. The AFL, they've had the Brisbane Lions have a three-peat. Geelong have won 3 out of 4. Richmond have won 3 out of 4.
I feel like there was more fanfare around the NRL three-peat. Maybe that's just because we're in Sydney. And you're right, because there's been more three-peats in the AFL, it's never happened in the NRL.
It's more likely for an AFL team to go on a dynasty run than it is an NRL team. You see, the greatest team of all time, the 2017 Storm, they never won a three-peat. The Roosters, 2018-19, they can't win 3 in a row. So for a Penrith Panthers team to win it, it is special.
It's a bigger achievement in the NRL to achieve a three-peat for sure. Because when you think about it, after 1 or 2 successful seasons, your team gets poached. Your team, whether it's your star halfback, your fullbacks, your role players, they're getting poached by teams that are outside the top 8. So for them to be able to lose Api Coruscant, Viliami Kikau, all these other great players that they've had to fill in the gaps with Luke Garner, other, you know, Mitch Kenny at hooker, for what they've achieved, I think it's far greater than an AFL team three-peat.
I'm not discounting Hawthorn's run. They lost Buddy Franklin. They lost a whole bunch of players as well. They did have their young guns come in and fill in spots. But it's just the AFL's designed for teams to last longer than the NRL. Dad, would you agree?
I agree. I mean, in the modern era now, it's very, very difficult. Even in AFL now, to get a three-peat now, what Penrith's done is probably unmatched.
But I will say, if Collingwood does three-peat, which will happen in the next 2 years, they'll win another 2
I reckon
premierships.
they'll double. I think they could double. But ultimately, you can say it's harder to three-peat in the NRL than it is to three-peat in the
And
AFL.
history has just shown that.
Yeah.
So that's why you got to give the nod to the Panthers.
That last time was in the 1980s, early 1980s, Parramatta.
That doesn't count because
I know, but I'm just saying,
I would say
it's
NRL
been how long?
Literally,
You know,
every time they bring up,
over 30 years.
When
Well,
Parramatta, the Dragons won 10 in a row. Listen,
No, 40 years.
There was
40
no-
years.
How many?
there was no defensive line back then. Everyone was a
They say
plumber,
it's like-
and no one was working a job.
Yeah,
I agree.
I agree.
80s rugby leagues like AFL or NRLW.
And I as much as it,
Come on,
you know,
mate, don't-
Fox
mate.
Sports go through the classics, the classic rugby league matches. I would say 90% of those players in the classic eras and the pre-NRL wouldn't make it in this current.
They probably
NRL.
wouldn't, no.
I'm being honest. The Peter Sterlings.
The average
I don't
athlete-
think they would have made it in today's NRL.
Yeah, but you got to understand, Bernard. They never. It wasn't a professional sport, so they did work. They worked a job. They only trained 2 or 3 nights a week. It was a totally different. And like you can't compare it. Like
Give respect
it
to
with exactly right. Like Steve Mortimer, does he make it today?
Injuries being shopped around. Is it the right move for the Melbourne Storm?
It's not the right move because great fullbacks are a premium, and you can see around the league, if you don't have a fullback, you're probably not going to win the comp.
Well, a lot of people are coming out and saying, if you're a club looking for a quality outside back, take the risk on Ryan Papenhuyzen. 100%.
Oh, if I'm the Bulldogs, I'm giving him $1 million. I don't care because you're a club that needs it. You need that X factor, and you need something to turn around your club.
Just say he gets right. It's a freak accident what happened to the ankle, right? And he was good to go. He got himself back to 100%. Take the risk on him. He's a player that's young enough that you would take the risk on.
And I've fallen on this sword all year. I've said Tom Trebojevic, if I was another club, I'd happily pay him. I get Manly, maybe don't want to keep him.
With Turbo, he's a little bit older than Papenhuyzen.
Doesn't
At least
matter.
Papenhuyzen is at 24,
The
25.
upside reward for the downside risk, I think is worth it.
The thing is,
saying-
with
you're
Melbourne,
saying-
is it the right move for Melbourne? Because Melbourne have Faya Logo coming up, who just played a quality game with Samoa. But they also have Nick Meaney, who impressed all season. So they can, with him being out for so long, afford to kind of shop Papenhuyzen around because they made a prelim final without him.
Yeah.
Craig Bellamy knows now that the forward pack he's got at the moment isn't good enough to win the comp. They want to free up some money so they can go out there. They've actually released some forwards. They've released them. They need to go out in the market and buy some
They
decent.
That's
need
probably
a
the
better
only
decent
thing that they were
forwards.
missing.
That's what they were missing this year.
insane-
That's what they need. If they're to win
insane-
another competition, it's not, they've got that up and comer, Faya He's an exciting player. I mean, he did play a reserve. It was basically a reserve grade Brisbane team that he played that night in that last round, when everyone rested their players.
Yeah.
You
You
know,
can't
to-
take too much information from it. But I'm saying Melbourne have addressed this rumour and said it's not true. Pappenhausen's come out and said, I don't know, that's the first time hearing of this. So let's just remember it is a vicious rumour.
It's a rumour. But I mean, if you're a club, I'd pounce on it nonetheless. What about this? Josh Curran looks like he's met with Cameron Ciraldo. So Josh Curran requested a release from the Warriors. Could be signing with a new club in 2024. Good landing spot, the Bulldogs. I know we always say any landing spot for a player could be the Bulldogs, but he's met with the Bulldogs and potentially Phil Gould, Cameron Ciraldo. Is it a good move for him? I think he's homesick in New Zealand. The Bulldogs looking for players. I don't know. They've signed a lot of role-playing players with the likes of, that wheat-gutted dog from Canberra.
Josh Salmon.
Jamin Salmon.
Drew Hutchinson.
Hutchison.
Kurt Mann.
I'm not saying Curran's a role player. He proved himself in the New Zealand
No,
Warriors
he's a
side
quality player.
as a quality, second rower, forward. even potentially bench forward as well.
I mean, he might not have name value, but if you mention a Warriors forward pack, everyone says, "Oh, the guy with the headgear."
I'd say
he's the
he's
guy
been
with the headgear.
one of the most underrated players in the NRL.
Mate, if you watch the Warriors games this year, and as you know, they got onto the finals, he was playing really good football. He gets a quick play of the ball, he's good defensively, and as the Bulldogs, you need good forwards. You've let go of Tavita Pangai Jr., that Thompson's gone as well. We've got Takayaho coming in, who's a 50-50 chance of being a good player.
Yeah.
They need good, hard-working forwards, and Sorreldo, if you've met with him, execute it. Sign him.
with some room in the cap now that Tavita Pangai Jr. is gone, I could see him just making some quality purchases.
And
like
value
this.
for money, I think he'd be a good value for money. He wouldn't cost too much. What would he go for? Maybe like
Mate,
400?
500 probably.
Yeah, it'd be a good signing for the Bulldogs. I mean, that was one of the areas that they struggled with, the depth in the forwards this year. So it'd be a great acquisition for the Dogs. Dogs are starting to look all right for next year. I'm actually starting to get a little bit hopeful that they might do okay.
Jump back on the
Well, I
bandwagon.
just want to
Yeah,
see him. I
like,
want
you
to
know.
see him at least in the top 8. A Josh Curran signing could start pushing him in the right direction with the
And
signings that
they're
they've already
really-
made.
Crichton at fullback is going to be a thing. It's not like
I think people are sleeping on Bronson Sherry as well. I don't know if you've been seeing his Instagram story. He's
jacked.
training the house down. He's looking massive. And, Roger Fabry, speed training. I think he's going to be one
Well,
of them.
he said goodbye to Roger Fabry because they're not allowed to
They're
work
not
together
allowed-
now.
Yeah, exactly. Now
which
that
is
it's
a
going
shame.
into pre-season. But I'm just saying, keep an eye out for him. Last rugby league rumour of the rumour roundup, Connor Tracy seeking an early release from the Sharks.
And people have pondered on this and they think that it's a genuine chance he's leaving. And it's a shame because I think those last few games where Kennedy was injured, he filled in at fullback and I think played better than Kennedy. So as the Sharks, if you're weighing it up on which players to keep, I'd let go of Matt Moylan. I think Trindle might be already gone or he's as good as gone as well. So they need to keep one of these players. And Tracy, if he's maybe just doing this as a threat to test his value on the open market and get paid a bit more money, it's very smart and I wish him the best.
Well, again, possible landing spots for him. Any club that needs a quality half fullback, you know what I mean? That could slot into 5'8", but could be a starting fullback at a team, especially teams that are outside the top 8 that need a fullback. But at the end of the day, if you're the Sharks, I'd be wanting to keep him because when you look at it, if they want to improve upon last season,
Got to retain.
they've got to retain him and players that played well for them. They weren't, especially towards the end of the season, weren't a team that you go, hey, they could win the comp.
They fell off towards that middle part.
100%.
sounds sounds like a recipe to get more money.
That's all it is,
But, I mean, you're seeing it like.
You don't blame him. You got to let the
But,
player
I mean,
get it.
there's
The
not
players
many-
are doing it all the time. They sound out a couple of clubs. Clubs shit themselves.
on 'em.
Yep, we'll throw some more
That's-
money
but
at
that's
you.
just,
and
you
then
know,
those-
the NRL, it's a
Who'd want to
business.
leave, Cronulla, the area? Like, seriously, if you live around that
Beautiful, yeah.
area,
I know.
do you really want to?
It's up there with the Bondis.
Yeah, you don't
Bondi,
want.
Manly, Cronulla, that's probably the top 3.
Yeah, you don't want to be.
Best landing spots for sure if you're a player. But he has the right to go test the market.
Better than,
because
but again, do you say if Canberra's offering him a couple $100K more,
no,
Canberra's
sorry,
it's
Canberra,
miserable.
no.
Miserable.
Well, actually,
It won't go there.
another rumour that I saw that I didn't have on the sheet, but I'd like to add. I saw somewhere that Nick Cottridge, they said he's had his worst season at Canberra and might be looking to go elsewhere. Canberra might be looking elsewhere.
Look, I love Nick. And no, Nick, personally, we've kind of had some interactions with him. I reckon his best bet is to stay out of Sydney. It's just there's too much noise in Sydney. I don't want to see Nick at Flamingos on a night out.
Yeah,
having
what
to
if
be
he goes?
distracted.
What if like?
I want Nick to return back to the Canberra, New South Wales winger form that he's in, and that's best to do it either at Melbourne or out of Sydney.
Redcliffe Dolphins, I think.
Or
would
the
be a great
Dolphins as
spot.
well, under a good coach, to get Nick playing back. He's an
He's an origin winger at his best.
At his best, he's an origin winger. And I just feel like being you saw how he was at the Bulldogs. There's just too much noise around Sydney. Not that it's on him to ignore that as a professional. It's just, I feel like he'd come under too much scrutiny here in Sydney. Whereas if he's playing under a quality coach where there's less kind of publicity and scrutiny on a team, that's where he's going to be his best. And if he just has one good preseason and he's in a team that is playing off the back of good forwards and has a good system, he'd be up there with as an origin winger.
I'm saying they called it out, said that he's had his lowest try scoring year. I think 3 tries this year for Canberra. So if he does want to leave Canberra, I'd love to
that's
see
just
Melbourne.
not on Nick. It's like he's a winger at the end of the day. He plays off the back of his forwards and good go forward from himself out of his own half. Canberra this year, again, they were a 1-12 team at best.
They never won by more than.
They
12
never won by
points.
12 exactly, and that's just a Canberra as a system were let down this year, and that's just I think they've just kind of had their time with Ricky Stewart as a coach. They need to start trying different things. I think if Canberra don't perform this year, this is Ricky Stewart's last season as a coach.
That's true.
Now going to NBA rumour, Dwight Howard has been offered a contract by the Phoenix Suns.
Great rumour. I love to hear it. I've jumped on the Phoenix bandwagon this year, and I've said after getting rid of DeAndre Ayton that they needed to sign a big centre that's going to be good defensively, and Dwight Howard is the perfect person for that role.
Well, everyone said last season they had an underwhelming finish to the season. That was Chris Paul's kind of almost last chance to kind of get that ring that he's never won. With the addition of Dwight Howard, is this a championship team?
Well, they're already a championship team. Any team that's got Durant, Devin Booker,
It's a
Bradley
missing
Beal,
puzzle piece.
It's just a great addition. They've got Nurkic, who's a good offensive centre, but I think defensively you have some questions. So in patches of a game where you need a more defensive mindset, you plug in Dwight Howard, and it's a perfect match for the Phoenix
I don't know.
Suns.
Remember Kobe called him soft.
Did call him a pussy, I think,
Yeah,
as well.
exactly. So is he a center that they need?
Yeah.
Well, with the talent that they already have, the NBA season this year, it's starting tomorrow. I know this will go out on Thursday, but it's starting tomorrow, Wednesday for Australians. It's when you think about the likes of obviously Milwaukee now, championship threat. Denver to go back to back. Now Phoenix Suns adding potentially Dwight Howard. There's even like Golden State. Championship duos and trios in certain teams. It's probably the most competitive the NBA has been.
It's up there now. This year, there's at least 5-6 teams that could possibly win it, but we'll cover the NBA a bit later. Staying on NRL, Papua New Guinea possibly approved as the next expansion team. Do you like it?
I do like it. As much as I would say, listen, we need to start looking at Adelaide, start looking at Perth, where you're starting to play more domestic games and we're taking origin games there. You've seen the crowds that the PNG.
I'd say Papua New Guinea is as domestic as Australia. It's still
It
considered
is. It's like travelling to Perth from Sydney. It's not too far, but the fanfare that the population of PNG get around rugby league, they live for it. They love it. It's basically their national sport.
It is
Papua
their
New
national
Guinea.
sport. They get more excited for that Prime Minister's 13 game than Australians do. So
The
they
only
deserve
thing
a team.
is the team's going to have to be based in Cairns here, which kind of makes sense. But there's some quality Papua New Guinean players that would be your automatic first signings for a PNG team. Justin Olam, you know, get the likes of Lockie Lamb back from overseas as well. It does make sense. Just how much would it be a PNG team? How often would they be travelling to PNG, playing
They
home
probably
games in PNG?
Maybe get 3 to 4 home games a year. They're based out of Cairns because I think Port Moresby's not a good
And
place
what would
to
the
live.
salary cap work? Would they get exemptions? You know, would it be similar to the Dolphins?
The same way any expansion team works. You give them you subsidise them as much as you can.
Well, the
The
Australian government's giving is 25 million funding. So that's
That's a big help.
I have it on good advice that 100% they'll be in the competition 2026, and Justin Holbrook will be the coach.
Justin Holbrook.
Justin Holbrook, yeah, geez.
Well, he did get hard done by
He
the
did
Titans.
get the old tap on the shoulder out of nowhere from the Titans. Anyone could go in and coach that team. You can get a Des Hasler who's currently in litigation with the Manly Seagulls. Any coach that's on the market would take that job because it's an opportunity to kind of look at what Wayne Bennett's done with the Dolphins, to kind of surprise some people and say, look, if I get some quality signings, we can make a run for the top 8.
To be based out of Papua New Guinea would be too difficult. So they'll just fly in, fly out when they've got to play. If you're playing a
But
game
is there enough talent in the NRL to kind of facilitate another team?
No, I think ultimately they're going to have to reduce the comp to about 12 to 14 teams.
Then who goes?
They won't do it. The thing is that what you've got to understand, boys, is that it's all about numbers now. Like, because basically Channel 9 and Foxtel pretty much run in NRL. They're the ones. They are, because they give the money. They want
They're
volume.
the ones that are
they want
giving
volumes of
the
games.
$1 billion TV deals.
Yeah, they want the volume. They don't care. They don't care that the games get.
But it's going to
lopsided.
diminish the product. Like you saw, there were some shit games this season from bottom 8 teams. They're just like, if there wasn't betting on these games, no one would watch them.
Well, there's already not enough parity. The best teams are that much better than the shit teams, and even the middle of the table sides, they can't compete. with
But
them.
it's great for New South Wales Cup players and Queensland Cup players that aren't getting the opportunities now, that can get those first
Potentially.
grade opportunities for sure. But you're going to diminish the product of NRL. It's not going to be the same standard, and you're going to get these games like Gold Coast Titans versus a Canberra that is a very scrappy game, not played. Bottom 8 teams that
Boring.
they're boring games that it's not high quality footy.
No, I agree. Look, at the end of the day, like, Peter V'landys should be focusing more on trying to find more juniors, grassroots, but they never invest the money in it.
Well, speaking of Peter V'landys, he's attending a White House state dinner hosted by Joe Biden as a guest of Anthony Albanese this week. So he's going to be in Washington at the White House, being hosted by Joe Biden. PVL, first he was at a lunch hosted by the Queen last year. Now he's meeting with Joe Biden this year. I know there's going to be other power brokers there. Is this great for rugby league? Peter V'landys in the ear of Joe Biden?
Look, Joe Biden is one of the dumbest people ever. Even after meeting
That's
Peter
a bit harsh,
V'landys,
thing.
he might not know who Peter V'landys
Look,
is.
I'm just saying that people are making a big song and dance saying, oh, this is great for rugby league and racing. Peter V'landys at the White House. Firstly, Joe Biden doesn't even know, that the NFL is
An American sport.
American sport at this point. I think he's too far gone. But if you're looking at US expansion, if he's talking to power brokers in the sports media, arena over there, could be good. But I think Peter V'landys has to worry about getting teams and domestic expansion before worrying about US expansion first.
I don't think they're looking at US expansion. I think the whole Las Vegas thing is to try and get into the betting market. Like they want, obviously, to be able to get people in the US when there's nothing on to be betting on sports in Australia, or obviously rugby league. But honestly, I think this is just payback because, NRL supported the yes vote last, they were strong supporters. This might be, But, for me, I don't like to talk politics, but it'd be nice to see Albanese spend a bit of time in Australia and worry about
That is
things
very
that
true.
are,
It is very true.
honestly, that guy does more travelling than anyone
What
I
is,
know.
what is he talking to Joe Biden about? Just NRL?
I have no
possibly
idea. They
Another
just
Vegas
did
next
some
year?
big deal with Microsoft, something on the internet. But
No, but even Peter V'landys, what could he possibly be talking to a president about? There's no beyond gambling. What are you going to talk to him?
I
Hey,
mean, he's known for his negotiating skills. Maybe Albanese just brought him there just
Maybe
to help on the negotiating table.
maybe they've got Peter V'landys there to negotiate peace between Israel and Palestine.
I don't know.
Who knows?
I don't know.
Who knows?
But all I'm saying is, could you imagine the
He's a great
interaction?
negotiator.
Imagine the interaction between Peter V'landys and Joe Biden. It's just like, g'day, mate, how's it going? What do you do? I handle NRL and racing New South Wales here while you're running the country. I can't imagine what they'd be talking
it's a
about.
very odd guest to bring along.
Yeah.
I could think of maybe 10 other people to bring first, maybe on the pecking order.
Yeah, but maybe he can negotiate something that Albanese can't because he's having an absolute shocker at the moment here on the domestic front. But looking at combat sports, we were just there for UFC 294. Jake Paul set to confirm his rematch with Nate Diaz. A lot of people were saying, this is bullshit. I don't want to see another rematch. We've seen this. You're just fighting washed up UFC fighters.
Everyone's sick of seeing you
Everyone's
fight
seen it.
MMA fighters.
But apparently he has agreed to fight under PFL, which is the fighting league,
UFC alternate.
which is a UFC alternative, to fight Nate Diaz under MMA rules. This is something that I think people would want to watch.
Well, Jake Paul's talked it up. He said, I want to have an MMA fight. I want to fight MMA fighters as an MMA fight. And it's actually happening now. Nate Diaz has agreed to fight him in a cage. So it's sort of boxing. Okay, this is Nate Diaz's craft. He's actually versing an expert, one of the greatest fighters in the UFC.
Well, his last fight was against Ferguson at UFC 279 or something like that. And this would be his first MMA fight outside of the UFC, Nate Diaz, in some time. I think Jake Paul is going to get choked out. It's probably the worst thing to happen. I think he's just trying to show maybe I can get into an octagon if I want. But he's just a striker at best. He's a boxer.
Well,
How are you
again-
you're gonna cop leg kicks? How's your jiu-jitsu? Like, you're going up against a guy who's an absolute freak in the octagon. It's just not. It's probably just a money grab for Jake Paul to say, hey, I can get some interest in going into MMA. But I think ultimately he gets bashed.
Well, that's where you look at it. If he does get bashed, then it's obviously not rigged. If he does win, it's rigged. There's no way he can win this fight and it not be a rigged fight. Nate Diaz, he got his money from the boxing. Maybe just say, I'll pay you double if you let me beat you in a cage.
No.
That's not happening?
If they do it, I think it's just a square up for Nate Diaz just to choke him out in like round 3 or something. They can play fight a little bit, but how are you going to beat one of the best MMA fighters, in UFC history?
Well, it's good.
Well, he's
it's
up there
good
in
to
age
see
now.
them listening to the fans because to go through what I saw, that KSI
Oh,
versus
KSI,
Fury,
Tommy Fury.
KSI,
Yeah,
KSI Tyson Fury.
Tommy Fury.
Tommy Fury. That was painful to
That was
watch.
painful
I
to
could
watch.
not watch
That whole card was, even the Logan Paul Dylan Dennis, it was just like, running away from each other. There was no interaction, as in what people paid to watch the card is just for them to square off and start going at it. And we didn't see that. It's like YouTube boxing is on a slow decline. So maybe this is an alternative to be like, hey, let's get into the MMA. You saw that Bryce Hall get into bare knuckle boxing. So, potentially now you'll see some YouTubers, some influencers getting into the MMA, which could be a nice change of pace.
But I still don't think it's too brutal of a sport. Boxing, at least it's a bit more classy. Not classy, but it's less damage to the rest of your body. You might cop a few jabs to the head.
Well,
but
Jake
MMA,
Paul would be going in as a $10 outsider.
I'm just saying, after watching Volk getting his head kicked in,
Yeah.
there's no way Bryce Hall or anyone like that said, you know what, I'm going to participate in that
Get into
sport.
MMA.
There's
Yeah.
no way. There's too much risk for getting your head absolutely brain cells lost. It's too much.
And KSI kind of just hacked boxing. He said, I can go up against a Tommy Fury. I just got to clinch with him for half an hour.
That's all he did.
I know.
It was embarrassing.
You can hack it.
And then he's complaining about the result. Like seriously, fight, try and win. Don't try and just stay in there just to get through the fight. It was embarrassing to watch. I had to turn it off.
Let's go through our NFL power rankings. We've been going through our top 5 NFL teams throughout each week. On this week's NFL standings, I know the games are still currently going on. What is our top 5 NFL power rankings?
Top 5 NFL. At number 5, the Miami Dolphins. After a big loss against the Eagles on the weekend, I haven't dropped them out of the top 5 because they're still a quality team. They got the best offense in the NFL. Tyreek Hill thought he had a down game this week, only catching one TD and 88 yards. But they've got both their cornerbacks to come back, Jalen Ramsey and Xavier Howard. So looking forward, they're still a top 5 team. And if you take away their 2 losses against the Buffalo Bills and the Philadelphia Eagles, okay, you can say they can't beat good teams, but they still beat the bad teams really, really well. So they're at number 5 and they're still a top team.
Number 4, we're going with the Baltimore Ravens, who just demolished the 5-1 Detroit Lions. This game was a bashing. Offensively, they just outclassed them. And I got to say, I think it kind of puts, Baltimore on the map as a team offensively that can be a threat in the comp.
Well, Lamar Jackson, when he's on, is the best quarterback in the NFL. I don't care what people say. I love the way he plays. When he runs, he throws. They got Odell Beckham, Mark Andrews. They're a quality, well-rounded team. And going forward again, who can beat them besides the top teams? They lost a shit game to Pittsburgh, which is painful to watch, but Pittsburgh is somehow 4-2, probably the most overrated team. But going forward as well, I just think they're a good team. At number 3, off the back of a loss, San Francisco 49ers. They're not a great team when they're losing. Back-to-back losses now. I still think as a roster, they're really well balanced, and they're going forward, they're going to be a good team. But you can't be top 2 if you're losing back-to-back games.
Well, number 1, we had them number 1 almost 2 weeks ago. Everyone was getting on us saying they're the best team in the NFL.
You lose to Cleveland.
3.
That because they've just lost. That's what I thought. I thought San Francisco were going to win. They've lost to Minnesota now, so they've got to drop down a spot.
So that brings us to number 2, Kansas City Chiefs. With Pat Mahomes and Travis Kelce being the best duo in the NFL, the only thing that's holding them back is the Swiftie distraction. They can't go from celebrating touchdowns to, hey, we've got to cut to Taylor Swift quickly doing a new handshake with Pat Mahomes' wife. It's getting fairly annoying, but ultimately, you can't lie with the numbers. I'm sure you saw that stat on screen. They're showing Travis Kelce's performance with and without Taylor Swift in attendance. With Taylor Swift in attendance, his numbers don't lie. He's a much better player. Or as in his reception yards are getting a lot better. His TDs are getting better. So he's performing when she's there. But you can't deny numbers. They're on a great run. Offensively, they've been great. And again, they're the best duo in the NFL at the moment.
And that puts us to number 1, the Philadelphia Eagles. Beat Miami Dolphins, who I think are a top team in the NFL. Offensively, they've got too much talent. Devontae Smith, AJ Brown, Jalen Hurts as well. Jordan Mailata, everyone was praising him on the weekend for getting out wide.
Getting that guard, it was like he was running a great screen for just that touchdown.
So offensively, they're great. Defensively, they've still got a ways to go, but that's what early in the season is. You iron out all these little defensive kicks. And then going forward as well, I just think they're too talented and they're going to be the best team in the NFL. And if you're putting the power rankings together, there's no team at the moment who would be a betting favourite against the Eagles.
So there you have it. That's our top 5 NFL power rankings. You've got Miami Dolphins 5, Baltimore Ravens 4, San Francisco 49ers 3, Kansas City Chiefs 2, and the Philly Eagles number 1. We were on Philly Eagles when they were undefeated. Now I think it's fair to say they are.
Well, now they're the only team they're the only team that's only lost 1 game. So, but by the standings, they're the best team, and by the power rankings, they're the best team as well.
Well, looking at racing coming up, it is spring racing season. Melbourne Cup around the corner.
Cox
Plate this weekend. What's our best tip for the Cox Plate?
Well, it's been a great carnival so far. We've had the Everest, we had the Caulfield Cup last weekend, and obviously Moonee Valley, Cox Plate, Manikato Stakes this week. Look, I tipped Fangirl. I backed Fangirl last week. I'm going to stick, in the King Charles up to beat Mr. Brightside. Mr. Brightside was favourite in that race. He's blown out. Obviously, the extra distance now. I think Mr. Brightside's a good each way bet, but I'm going to stick with Fangirl. Look, it's a tight track, Moonee Valley. You got to be up. You got to be up on the speed to win. Mr. Brightside's a front-running horse. They're my 2 tips.
What's Fangirl paying? What would it
Fangirl's paying $15. Mr. Brightside's paying $8.
$9 is pushed
$9.
out to.
It's pushed out to $9.
But there's some good
Could be
quality
a little
horses.
redemption run for Mr. Brightside.
Well,
And
racing.
the hay stable is absolutely flying at the moment.
That's right. But other horses in the race, Zaki paying a good amount as well. Alligator Blood, who's also in the race. There's some quality horses. Romantic Warrior's the favourite, the Hong Kong horse, who always, I think Hong Kong horses in this race, they always disappoint. Was it Constantinople, I think a couple of years ago, that came in and won the race? But other than that, I'm going to go with Mr. Brightside. I'm going against Dad here. I know Fangirl beat it in the King Charles race, but the value of $9 for a previous $1.85 favourite, they're my favourite horses to back. So I'm booking in Mr. Brightside. Catch me
Mate,
with a wins.
horse racing's hotting up, mate. We've got the Derby the following week, and then the Melbourne Cup. So exciting times for horse
Probably
racing.
peak time for racing at the moment.
Spring
Okay.
season.
Let's look to EPL. While we were away, I was sitting, pretty close to the UFC, and the timings were a bit off because usually Australians, obviously, we got to get up, 2, 3 a.m. sometimes midnight to watch the EPL. While we're sitting watching, the Volkanovski fight just about to start, it was Chelsea Arsenal at 3 a.m. Sydney time. I was like, can we get it up on the phone while we're watching thing? 2-2 draw. What's the around the grounds update for the EPL?
Chelsea getting back on track with a draw against Arsenal. They were up 2-0, but still somehow choked a 2-0 lead to have it 2-2. It's disappointing on Arsenal's end to actually be playing that shit against a shit side like Chelsea, but we'll just leave it at that, to draw. Manchester City get back on top with a back-to-back win. They're not top of the table, but they were for a bit till Tottenham won. So Tottenham continuing their winning form, back to the top of the table. Ange Ball somehow keeps going. And again, if you're looking at Manchester City, Erling Haaland did score, so he's getting back on track. They're still the most dangerous team. I still think Tottenham's going to drop off, and Arsenal will be the team that can only
You
contend
really
with Man
are
City.
death riding Tottenham.
Well, because I've come out now and said that they're shit, so I've got
It's
to be
not that
proven
they're
right.
shit. They haven't lost the game.
Yeah, but if you look at the way they play,
Undefeated. And
How can you go from in the NFL, Philadelphia, so great, undefeated? They're the only team that's undefeated. And then you look at what
it's the
Tottenham
way
are
they
doing.
play. It's the way they play. It's not that impressive. They're squeaking by shit teams, and besides their draw against Arsenal, they haven't really beaten
As
many
a
good
coach,
teams.
Ange is breaking records.
That's what I mean. Ange Postecoglou has broken an EPL record after this win against Fulham. It's like
It's a Tottenham record.
I think it's an EPL record.
Wow.
Yeah, it is an EPL record. So to go 23 points to start the EPL season off the first 9 games, he addressed it and saying, look, I don't really look too much into records, but to be somewhat an Australian coach doing unbelievable things in the EPL, breaking EPL records, to start off your season with 23 points off 9 games, you got to hand it to him. He's doing something.
He's
breaking
doing
EPL
well.
records as a coach. You got to applaud it. He's not too concerned about it. He just wants to keep on track and not fall off, is what you think he's going to be doing. But he's up there with some great teams and great coaches who have got off to a great start in EPL game. In an EPL season.
I know I'm death riding them, but I'll give credit where it's due. They're playing really well and top of the table.
7 wins, 2 draws, no defeats to start an EPL season. Let's applaud Ange Ball. It's working. I want to say, he's got a lot of bandwagon fans here in Australia now, but he's doing great things as an Aussie coach. Could open the doors up for a lot more Aussie coaches to go over into the EPL.
I think he's in a class of his own in terms of Aussie coaching. Who was the other guy, the old guy that coached Australia? What's his name? He used to coach Sydney FC.
Popovich.
No.
Graham Arnold.
Graham Arnold, yeah. I think he was the only other one that could potentially have had a go. But he's trailblazing at the moment, so good luck to you. It's sad, but it's going to fall off.
Okay.
I've called it. It's going to happen.
Well, another thing that was in the news massively was USADA no longer being the official anti-doping arm of the UFC.
Which is massive. I don't get how that works. So does that mean like UFC fighters can take steroids now?
No,
No
it
one's gonna
doesn't
know?
mean that. It just means they'll do their own independent testing, or they'll bring in another body to do it.
Exactly. So
Well,
I'm just saying
the NFL do their own internal testing. I think sports like the WWE now do their own internal testing as well. It's not foreign. The NFL have their own way of dealing with
and the NFL,
people that
how do they report their doping? Oh, they took performance-enhancing drugs. What did they take? Be specific about it. They could have taken a range of things.
It's better. I think it's better for a sport to keep it in house because you don't have to deal
because
with.
then there's bias there. So you're just saying at any point in time, a UFC fighter can take something and it's Dana White's call whether they get in trouble.
It's not Dana White's
It's got to be
They'll have their own
independent.
independent testing. It's like, do you remember the New England Patriots
Independent
player?
testing means that obviously Dana White would have influence over.
That's what I'm saying. If
over
it's
the
a,
decision.
it's like ultimately
when it's
the UFC's
an
call.
So is
independent,
anyone going to
when
call
it's
out
an
the
indep-
NFL for doing it?
when
have.
it's an independent body like USADA,
It removes bias.
Yeah, it removes bias. This way, obviously, they want to. I mean, not that look. I don't even believe that taking performance-enhancing drugs in a sport like UFC would help anyway.
Yes, it
Like,
would. What do you mean,
100%.
man?
Ask Mark
Cardio,
Hunt.
endurance.
Mark Hunt's still suing the UFC, I think, because he got bashed by Brock Lesnar.
Okay.
In
But
UFC
that does
200.
mean
So could we see Brock Lesnar at UFC 300 now with no USADA?
Brock Lesnar, take as many drugs as you want. Dana White, turn a blind eye because I want to see Brock Lesnar back in the octagon.
With the partnership of WWE and UFC under TKO Group, Brock Lesnar could be the only person that was at UFC 100, UFC 200, and potentially now UFC 300. He said he would never rule it out. And imagine a stacked card with Brock Lesnar making his return at UFC 300.
That's
Just
the
put him
thing.
up against any heavyweight, people would pay to see it.
Put him up against John Jones. I want to see it happen.
No, that would never happen. John Jones would just wipe the floor with him.
Yeah, it doesn't matter. He's still getting paid for it. All they care about is money at the end of the day, so let it happen. But I'm just saying, there's no way you can have the UFC, who have had fighters be proven to have taken stuff in the past, and not have an independent third party oversee it. I think with every sport, it needs to be independent because it does remove the bias.
I haven't read too much into it, and I probably should have, of why they are parting ways with USADA. There's like, USADA came out and really damned that the UFC are kind of been really uncooperative with USADA, and Dana White kind of went back and forth with them. But at the end of the day, there's other sporting bodies that do it. Why can't the UFC do it?
It was funny, on the weekend, there was a fan question to Bilal Muhammad, a UFC fighter. One of the fighters in the crowd goes, now that USADA's been removed, are you going to take all the drugs in the world or you're going to start taking steroids and get in the octagon? He goes, listen, the UFC is going to put something in place that it's going to be the same thing. So he goes, obviously, I still can't take anything. So that's where it is. They're going to put something in place.
Test it out if you're high level. He may as well. But the NBA season starts tomorrow. This is the 23-24 NBA season finally kicking off. Let's do some way too early predictions. We sat down with LaMarcus Aldridge to go through some of his early predictions. We'll get those out ahead of the NBA season. But Nick, who do you think is going to be the MVP of this season?
Quick fire, MVP, I'm going Luka Doncic. He was a favourite entering last season, and I think he's in much better shape. There's vision of him looking absolutely shredded. On the back of that, having Kyrie next to him, I think he's MVP.
I'm going to go Nikola Jokic. Getting
Okay.
robbed last season. I think he's going to back it up this season.
Walking triple-double.
Yeah, and I think and that's going to be a highlight of the Nuggets season this year, going into potentially a back-to-back finals. Okay, who's going to be your championship winning team?
Championship winning team, look, it's so tough. There's so many good teams. You've got Milwaukee in the East, you've got Phoenix. I think Philadelphia's dropped off. But if I have to put it down to one team, I'm going Phoenix. I think I'm riding Kevin Durant. He's the best player when he's healthy, and hopefully he can stay healthy, and they'll be the champions.
I'm going to go with Milwaukee. I like this new duo of Damian Lillard and Giannis together. Giannis just inked a new deal as well. They're going to be confident going into this season. It could be the missing puzzle for Milwaukee. And like I said, it's probably the most heated competition the NBA's seen in a while. So I think anyone can win it at this point. Even AD came out recently and said his goal this season is to play all 82 games, which would be nice to see. I don't know if it will happen.
And Nick, you're always jumping on the
Different bandwagons.
No, but I'm just saying, like I'm going to go Denver Nuggets because I think they're going to go back to back. I think they were impressive in that
last finals.
In all the final series, they were very, very impressive. They were comprehensive. And the only thing, you've seen it before, Nick. When you try and put too many superstars in one side, it just doesn't work.
Yeah, but
they've tried to do it. They tried to do it at Brooklyn.
Brooklyn, they only played 17 games together, so
they've tried to do it. But I'm saying that LeBron's tried to do it at
and usually
the
it works.
Brooklyn tried to do it. Like
Brooklyn, they played 17 games together. It's not a fair actual assessment
and
of
Kyrie.
The thing is, I'm just saying, when you got guys with those egos, they just clash.
This is different.
Clash. I mean, look, I'm gonna.
You need a Phil Jackson.
I'll give you an example. Back in the day, Real Madrid. I mean, I don't know if you've been watching that Beckham Netflix series. Yeah, the Netflix series. Real Madrid had like the superstars of the sport, and they were losing games because there were too many egos.
It's like PSG as well. They couldn't all get on.
I'm just saying, wherever the stars are is where the championships go, and it's it. In the NBA, it's happened. LeBron went to the Heat, they win. Kevin Durant goes to Golden State, they win. Kevin Durant goes again to now Phoenix, they're going to win. It just happens.
Okay.
LeBron went to the Lakers, they win. The superstars win championships. Durant is the superstar that's going to win it.
Give me your finals matchup.
Finals matchup, well, I've got Phoenix winning it, and I think that they'll beat Milwaukee in a rematch of the 2021 NBA Finals.
Yeah, wow.
So that's what will happen. And it's a good thing because Milwaukee with Damian Lillard is a much better team. And I think he complements that team as well. 3-point shooting is all Giannis needs, and it's a drive and dish it out. Giannis doesn't make a difference. But speaking of Giannis, a 3-year extension, $186 million.
Is this a max?
I think this is the max you can
He's
get.
got a player option as well.
It's
I
like
don't see him really leaving Milwaukee.
$64 million a year. That's unheard of in the NBA. That's just like, that's completely different money. What do you even do with that much money?
Yeah, but to his credit, you don't see him missing many games. Like he's not that injury prone of a player.
Nah, and he plays hard all the
He
time.
plays hard every single game. Like I said, MVP. He's been an MVP. He's their star player. You build the franchise around him. He's a marketable player.
Oh,
He's funny
absolutely.
off the court.
Yeah.
It's worth it.
No, it's definitely worth it, but he's now lined himself up with Damian Lillard's deal. So whatever happens with that duo, they'll be departing together. But now with that money, with that expectation, is it championship or bust?
Yeah, 100% it is. Well, I mean, they've got him for the next.
I'm saying because that
championship within the next 2 years.
That clip went viral at the end of this year when they got knocked out, saying, it's not a failure of a season. We build upon this, but it's like, okay, now you've got Damian Lillard. You've just re-signed for $60 million a year. It's a failure if you don't win the championship, Giannis. I'm sorry. That's all it is. Like, you can't be expected to not win. And it's like, as a player, yes, you can say, we're building upon this and we're building towards another season. It doesn't matter. Every season's its own individual thing. If you don't win the championship, it's a bust.
I don't have an issue with that. So he's the best player in the league, by far.
Okay.
He's the best player.
Statistically, he is. Yeah.
Statistically right now. But I think that's all for us in this episode of Primetime. Make sure you're subscribing to the YouTube at The JBK Show. Take a look at all the clips online at Picklebet. And as always, we'll be back next week for a fresh episode. So make sure you subscribe. And that's all from us. Back to you in the studio, George.